Ready? Alright, good morning everybody. Welcome to another read aloud of Hero. We have got a pretty fast-paced story going on here. Diego is on the edge of his seat, literally on the edge of the seat, waiting for us to continue. Now I've got Otter as always. I've got a nice new handmade mug my wife had made for her company. It's got her little logo on it for Heartwood Design. And when I drink from it, I feel like a giant because it's so tiny. Alright, got a little more light here. Here we go. Chapter 20. Nick Cap never even saw Zach coming. Zach grabbed him from behind with a fistful of his black windbreaker before he had a chance to lay a hand on Kate. Kate watched Zach the same way someone watches fireworks on the 4th of July. Zach couldn't believe it, that Nick Cap had come back here, that he was enough of an idiot to think he could get away with messing with Kate. His problem? Not mine. Hey, it's gross. Hey, Diego. Hey, it's gross. Thank you. He lifted Nick Cap off the ground, a little surprised at how easy it was, how light the guy felt to him. Then Zach launched him through the air in almost the same motion. Like the guys picking up trash in front of his building tossed bags into the back of the truck. Nick Cap landed hard on the grass. Sweet. Stay out of the way, Zach said to Kate. Nice to see you too, she said. The guy tried to roll up into a sitting position, trying to get up to fight back, but he couldn't. Probably mad I told him to stop cleaning his feet. Enough, he said. That's my line, Zach said. You come near her again, even think about putting your hands near her again, it will be much worse. Zach knelt down in front of him now. He grabbed the front of his jacket, pulled him close, and said, "Why are you doing this?" Nick Cap was breathing hard, no expression on his face, eyes on Zach. You okay? Did you just burp on camera? Ew. All right. I said, why do you keep doing this? What do you want from me? Nothing. Zach shouted at him now. Who sent you? Nick Cap finally spoke. You're not asking the right questions, kid. At least your father asked the right questions. Zach shook the guy now, snapping his head back. What do you know about my father? A lot, Zach, man, he said, finishing with the type of smug grin Zach was used to seeing from Spence. Zach felt like he had been punched. Another person who knew that name. Now, what do you say you let me go? Not until you tell me what I want to know, Zach said. Nick Cap grinned again. You are like him in one way. I have to say that. Neither of you knows what he doesn't know, or in this case, didn't know. Zach pictured himself knocking the smile off the guy's face, forced himself to breathe before he spoke. Again, he said, what do you know about my father? Like I said, a lot, but I'm not the one to tell you, kid, no matter how much you bounce me around. And in that moment, Zach knew the guy was telling him the truth, at least about that. He gave him one more shove, unclenched his fists. When was the last time they hadn't been clenched? And then let him go. Zach stood up first. The guy's grin looked back. You gotta chill, Zach, man. Don't call me that. See, that's what I'm talking about. Even on that, you gotta chill. You did good today, better than I expected. Then he stood, turned and ran down the track. In a matter of seconds, he was gone again, disappeared. Kate was standing next to Zach now. You let him go? She said. He'll be back, Zach answered. That's what I'm afraid of. So it seems that maybe this guy isn't a bad guy, but he's testing Zach or trying to push him to the limits so Zach can figure out what powers he does have and how to react to him. Let's read one more chapter. Chapter 21. As winter made the turn toward spring in New York City, Zach's mom began to spend more time with Uncle John. Zach kept finding out more and more about this new self, testing the range of his powers whenever he could. As he did so, he saw his mom finally turning into her old self. First it was dinner out at a restaurant, then a Broadway show opening. Then there was a trip to the movies over 86th Street, which turned into a weekly event for her and Uncle John. One time they were coming in just as Zach was preparing to sneak past the night doorman again and patrol the city for a couple of hours, and he'd had to scramble back into his bed. Finally, one night, his mom, downstairs waiting for Uncle John to pick her up, Zach used the D word on her. "What time is your date?" he asked. She laughed, but in a high-pitched way she did when she was nervous or embarrassed. "A date? With John Marshall? Stop your crazy talk." He grinned and let her know he was playing. "All right, if it's not a date, what would you call it?" "It's dinner, mister, with maybe some coffee afterwards." "Well then, I guess what I'm really asking here is the difference between a date with somebody and going out to dinner, including coffee afterward, with the same somebody." "It's been too long since my last date with your father, I might add, for me to even remember dating. This is dinner with your Uncle Tom. With your Uncle John." They were on the long couch in the living room. "Hey," she said, "this isn't bothering you, is it? Me getting out of the house a little for something other than the campaign?" "Nope." "Are you sure?" "Yep. Your Uncle John isn't just a good friend, he's practically family." "Mom, you think I don't know that? He was like a brother to your father." "A band of brothers," Dad always said, even though there was only 2 guys in the band. She slid down the couch, put an arm around him, and kissed him on the top of his head. "I know you were just kidding," she said, "but the thing you were kidding about, it's not like that between John and me. Not now, not ever, not happening." Zach wondered if Uncle John would have answered the same way, and his mom, being a mom, must have mentioned their conversation to Uncle John, because the next Saturday morning, when Zach came down for breakfast, Uncle John was sitting at the kitchen, waiting for him. He was in jeans, sneakers, and his favorite Red Sox sweatshirt. It had always been a fun competition between Zach's dad and Uncle John. Tom Harriman bled the dark blue with Yankee pinstripes, and Uncle John had grown up outside of Boston and was a Red Sox fan. It was probably the only thing they'd ever disagreed on. "Get dressed," Uncle John said. "We're going to do something we haven't done in way too long." "What?" "Young Zachary, you and I are going to have ourselves a good old-fashioned knock-around day." Zach rubbed the sleep out of his eyes. "With you wearing a Red Sox sweatshirt around New York? Yeah, we're going to get knocked around, all right." "Talk, talk, talk. More dressing, less talking. Adventure awaits." Zach's first knock-around day with Uncle John was 4 years ago, when Uncle John saw how much Zach had been missing his dad. Over the years, they kept up the tradition, always when Zach's dad was away. The rules were simple. Zach could go anywhere in the city he wanted, sometimes 3 or 4 stops before they were through. But he could only pick out one at a time. No itinerary, no game plan. They would just make a Saturday or Sunday as they went along. Sometimes they'd have a car and a driver, sometimes they'd take cabs, sometimes they'd use a subway. Always, though, it was big fun. They ate a lot of junk food, usually every few hours, whether they were hungry or not. Uncle John insisted that knock-around days, if done right, should resemble all-you-can-eat contests. Since it was already 11:30 by the time Zach got dressed and came back downstairs, he announced that he was going to skip breakfast and go straight to lunch. "Where?" Uncle John said. They had a car waiting for them downstairs. "Sylvia's," Zach said. "The best and most famous restaurant in Harlem, serving the best food, at least in Zach's estimation, in the whole city." Done. They ate like complete idiots, Zach ordering the meatloaf smothered in Sylvia's secret sauce with garlic mashed potatoes and ribs on the side, followed by coconut cake for dessert. "You go wherever you want to next," Uncle John said. "Just drop me off at the emergency room." "You're the one who says we have to pig out. I didn't know Sylvia's was going to be the lead-off." "Speaking of which," Zach said, "I have picked where I want to go next." "Say the word." 2 words. City Field. "To get us ready for the baseball season," Zach shrugged. "Unless you can't get us in, of course." Uncle John already had his cell phone out. "Can I get us in? Is the Pope Catholic? Did the Knicks stink last night?" Ouch. Uncle John walked a few feet down the sidewalk on Lenox Avenue and came back 2 minutes later and said, "We're in. I hope that didn't take too long." He winked at Zach. A half hour later, they were standing in the outfield under the huge old-fashioned Pepsi sign. "I still don't understand how you became a Mets fan," Uncle John said. "Simple. David Wright." Then he said, "And I'm allowed to run the bases?" "Knock yourself out." Zach stood in the batter's box, which had already been drawn in brilliant white, even though the opening day was still a few weeks away. Then he took off for first, took off for real, running the bases hard, touching the inside corner of each base like his dad had taught him. 15 feet from home plate, he launched into a head-first slide, not worrying about getting dirty, not on a knock-around day. He slid around an imaginary tag, reaching back to touch the plate with an outstretched hand. "I thought the catcher might have nicked you on the way in," Uncle John said. "Nope, never touched me." "First run of the season," Uncle John said. "Your old man would have been proud." As soon as he brought up Zach's dad, Zach could see from the look on his face he was sorry he had. Don't worry, Uncle Jay, Zach said. I miss him all the time, whether we're talking about him or not. Me too. They walked through the Mets dugout. One of the security guards let Zach have a look inside the clubhouse, which was filled with unpacked boxes waiting for the season. When they were outside in the parking lot, Uncle John said, There's a method to my madness today, by the way. Zach nodded. I figured. I don't want you to have the wrong idea about your mom and me. I don't. Yeah, Uncle John said. I think you do. And I would too. There's a line your old man liked to use, from an old joke. It's not so funny when it's your mom. So I get it, young Zachary. I really do. So do I, Zach said. Really, I do too. But whether you do or not, I want you to understand. I always told your dad that I'd look after both of you if anything ever happened to him. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Trying to keep a promise to your dad, not trying to be your dad. Okay? Okay. Uncle John put his fist. Zach pounded it lightly. Packed, Uncle John said. Packed. Now, let's blow this pop stand. Blow this pop stand? Wow, you're older than I thought. Oh, Uncle John said, you have no idea. They ate cheeseburgers at P.J. Clark's on 3rd Avenue. When they got back to the Manhattan, Zach polishing them off with an apple pie and an ice cream. As he did, he noticed Uncle John staring at him, shaking his head. What? Your old man ain't like this. Always. Starting in college, never gained a pound. He winked. You remind me more of him all the time. Zach kept shoveling in the pie and ice cream, thinking that Uncle John didn't know the half of it. It was late afternoon by the time they walked out of Clark's, but Zach still wasn't ready to go home. Neither was Uncle John, apparently. Where to next, he said. We walk. Where? My favorite place in the city, Zach said. Anywhere. Anywhere turned out to be Central Park. Even on a knock-around day, he felt himself being drawn there. They gradually made their way east and north, past a horse-drawn hansom cabs and bikers and joggers. The more they walked, the less they spoke. Not because they'd run out of things to say, just because the quiet seemed to fit them right now. Both of them letting the last of the afternoon just be. They were past the zoo, heading toward the 66th Street entrance, when Zach said, Thanks, Uncle John. I'm done. Uncle John laughed. Oh, you don't know how happy I am to hear you say that, Zachary, because old Uncle John was done about 59th and 3rd. I thought I saw a look when the last hansom cab passed us, Zach said, like you wanted to kick out that nice couple and jump in. You know me so well, Uncle John said as he laughed. Then he wasn't laughing or walking. He'd stopped the same time Zach had, both of them staring at the giant. What? Okay, that's the end of chapter 21. Alright, I gotta know what the giant is. One more chapter. 22. He was the biggest person Zach had ever seen outside of the NBA game, dressed in a dark suit and an old-fashioned brim hat pulled low over his eyes. His features were distorted, almost like he was wearing a mask. His hands alone were the size of basketballs. There was no way for Zach to be sure what 7 feet tall looked like in street clothes. But if this guy wasn't all of that, he was close, and he looked as if he weighed enough to shove Shaquille O'Neal out of the paint. Zach looked around. Nobody else in sight, like somehow the stage had been emptied for him again. The man said to Uncle John, The boy is coming with me. Uncle John stepped forward, trying to protect Zach. I don't know who you are or what you're talking about, but this boy isn't going anywhere with you. I'm not leaving without him. I'm not like the others. What others? Asked the boy. Zach, Uncle John said, eyes not leaving the giant. Do you know this man? No. The giant said, No games this time. What games? Uncle John said, standing his ground, head tilted back like he was looking up at a tall building. Leave us, now. Then Uncle John shouted, Run, Zach! As he ducked and charged forward, driving his shoulder into the giant's stomach. The huge man didn't flinch or move, or even acknowledge that he'd been hit. He just shook his head, almost in disgust, grabbed Uncle John by the shoulders, lifted him as easily as he would a toy, and threw him in an arc across the open field to his left. In that moment, John Marshall looked as if he'd been shot out of an invisible cannon, flying before he landed at the base of a thick old tree with a truly sickening thud. Then he lay still. The giant reached for Zach, saying, Let's go. And without planning it, without even thinking about it, just on fire again, Zach Harriman was the one in the air. He was the one flying. He elevated like LeBron and then just hung there in midair in front of the giant, scissor kicking him in the middle of his face. Yeah, Zack said, let's go. Still in the air, not for long. Unlike Nick Cap, the giant fought back. He backhanded Zack out of the air like King Kong swatting at airplanes. This time it was Zack hitting the ground hard. In pain, a lot of pain, but trying to roll away. He felt a huge hand on him then, felt himself being turned around as though he weighed nothing. There was blood on the giant's face where Zack had connected with his nose. Don't get ahead of yourself, the giant said. You're not ready for someone like me. Then came these giant hands again, catching Zack on the side of his head. Zack went down. The giant kicked him. Zack heard shouts, a siren slowly getting louder. Then he didn't hear anything. Okay, that's where chapter 22 ends. We'll have to figure out who this giant is, if he means harm or if he's going to be helping him, but definitely seems like Uncle John got hurt. Seems like Zack got hurt. Doesn't seem very friendly at this point. We'll find out more tomorrow. I hope you're enjoying the story.